Let us begin our journey tonight by traveling back in time, to a city of stone and of dreams, a city that was about to awaken from a long and quiet slumber and, in doing so, would set the entire world ablaze with a new and brilliant light. This is the story of the Renaissance, the great rebirth of art and of learning. And our story begins in the late 14th century, in the bustling, vibrant, and fiercely proud city-state of Florence. Imagine yourself standing on one of the ancient bridges that span the Arno River as the first, soft, golden light of dawn begins to creep over the Tuscan hills. The air is cool and still, and the city is just beginning to stir. You can hear the distant, gentle chime of a church bell, the quiet clatter of a baker's cart on the cobblestone streets, and the first, sleepy calls of the merchants who are beginning to set up their stalls in the great, open piazzas. For centuries, Europe had been living in the long shadow of the Middle Ages, a time of profound faith, but also a time of rigid dogma and of a worldview that was largely focused on the afterlife and the spiritual realm. The great achievements of the ancient Greeks and Romans, their art, their philosophy, their science, were all but forgotten, their magnificent ruins a silent and crumbling testament to a lost and glorious past. But here, in the heart of Florence, something new and revolutionary was beginning to take root. A new way of thinking, a new way of seeing the world, was beginning to emerge. This was the birth of humanism. What was this powerful new idea? It was a profound shift in focus, a turning away from an exclusively otherworldly perspective, and a new and passionate celebration of the human experience itself. Humanist scholars began to look back, not to the immediate past, but to the great classical world of Greece and of Rome, searching for a lost wisdom. They began to scour the dusty archives of the old monasteries, unearthing and translating the long-forgotten works of great thinkers like Plato and Cicero. And in these ancient texts, they found a worldview that celebrated not just divine glory, but human potential, a worldview that championed reason, that valued individual achievement, and that saw a profound and beautiful dignity in the human form and in the human mind. This new and exciting philosophy began to spread through the intellectual circles of Florence, sparking a new and insatiable curiosity about the world and about humanity's place within it. But for a great artistic revolution to truly take hold, it needs more than just new ideas, it needs powerful and visionary patrons. And in Florence, the Renaissance found its greatest and most influential champions in the form of a single, powerful banking family, the Medici. The Medici family, particularly its great patriarch, Cosimo de' Medici, and later, his magnificent grandson, Lorenzo the Magnificent, were more than just wealthy bankers, they were passionate and knowledgeable patrons of the arts. They understood that great art was more than just decoration, it was a powerful expression of a city's pride, its wealth, and its intellectual vitality. And so, they began to invest their immense fortune in the brilliant artists and thinkers of their time, commissioning great works of painting, of sculpture, and of architecture that would transform the very face of their beloved city. They created a vibrant and competitive artistic environment, a place where young and talented artists could learn from the great masters of the past and could push the boundaries of creative expression. It was the Medici who established the Great Platonic Academy, a gathering of the city's finest minds who came together to discuss the newly rediscovered philosophy of Plato. And it was their lavish and consistent support that provided the financial and the intellectual freedom for artists like Donatello, Botticelli, and a young Leonardo da Vinci to create some of the greatest masterpieces of the early Renaissance. Florence, under the guidance of the Medici, became a great crucible of creativity, a place where the new, humanistic ideas were being translated into breathtaking works of art that would go on to inspire the entire world. And so, as the morning sun rises higher over the beautiful, red-tiled roofs of Florence, a new era is dawning. The long and quiet slumber of the Middle Ages is coming to an end, and a new and brilliant age of discovery, of innovation, and of breathtaking artistic achievement is about to begin. The seeds of the Renaissance have been planted in the fertile soil of Florence, and from these seeds, a great and beautiful forest of human genius is about to grow, a forest whose branches will eventually reach to the very stars themselves. In the quiet, sun-drenched cloisters and the bustling workshops of early 15th century Florence, a profound and revolutionary change was beginning to take place in the world of art. For centuries, medieval art had depicted the world in a flat, two-dimensional, and often symbolic way. The figures in these paintings were often of different sizes based not on their position in space, but on their religious or social importance. There was little to no sense of true, realistic depth. The world of the painting was a flat, spiritual realm, not a reflection of the three-dimensional world in which we live. But the artists and the thinkers of the Renaissance, with their new and insatiable curiosity about the natural world and their deep admiration for the realism of classical art, were no longer content with these old conventions. They sought to create a new kind of art, an art that could capture the world as the human eye truly sees it. They sought to create the illusion of real, three-dimensional space on a flat, two-dimensional surface. And the key to unlocking this great challenge lay not in the artist's brush, but in the precise and beautiful world of mathematics. The great breakthrough came from a brilliant and famously cantankerous Florentine architect and engineer named Filippo Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi, the very same man who would go on to design the magnificent and iconic dome of the Florence Cathedral, was obsessed with the principles of classical art and architecture. He traveled to Rome to study the ancient ruins, and he was struck by the incredible sense of realism and of depth in the surviving Roman paintings and reliefs. And he became convinced that the ancient Romans had understood a set of mathematical principles for creating this illusion of depth, principles that had been lost to the world during the Middle Ages. And so, through a series of ingenious experiments that he conducted in the streets of Florence around the year 1415, Brunelleschi rediscovered the powerful and transformative principles of linear perspective. What was this revolutionary idea? Linear perspective is a mathematical system that allows an artist to create a realistic illusion of depth on a flat surface. It is based on the simple and beautiful idea that all parallel lines in a scene, as they recede into the distance, appear to converge at a single point on the horizon, a point known as the vanishing point. By carefully organizing the composition of a painting around this vanishing point, an artist could create a convincing and mathematically perfect illusion of three-dimensional space. Brunelleschi famously demonstrated his discovery with two painted panels that depicted the Florentine baptistry. He used a small peephole and a mirror to create a perfect illusion, a demonstration that stunned his fellow artists and thinkers and that would change the course of Western art forever. But it would take a young and brilliant painter to be the first to truly and powerfully apply these new scientific principles to the art of painting. This was Masaccio. A true prodigy who died at the tragically young age of 26, Masaccio, in his short and brilliant career, completely revolutionized the art of painting. In his magnificent frescoes in the Brancacci Chapel in Florence, and particularly in his famous masterpiece, the Holy Trinity, which he painted in the church of Santa Maria Novella around 1427, Masaccio used Brunelleschi's new system of linear perspective with an incredible and unprecedented power and sophistication. For the very first time in centuries, the figures in a painting seemed to exist in a real, believable, and three-dimensional architectural space. The effect on the viewers of his time must have been absolutely stunning, as if they were looking not at a flat wall, but through a great window into another, deeper, and more realistic world. But Masaccio's revolution was not just about mathematical perspective. He also brought a new and powerful sense of realism and of human emotion to his figures. Unlike the stiff and stylized figures of medieval art, Masaccio's figures had a real sense of weight, of volume, and of three-dimensional form. He used light and shadow, a technique known as chiaroscuro, to model his figures and to give them a powerful and dramatic presence. And their faces were not just generic symbols, they were filled with a deep and profound and very human emotion, with grief, with awe, and with sorrow. His famous fresco, The Expulsion from the Garden of Eden, depicts Adam and Eve not as distant theological concepts, but as real, suffering human beings, their faces contorted with a deep and heartbreaking anguish. This new and powerful combination of scientific perspective and profound human emotion was the true beginning of the Renaissance style of painting. Brunelleschi had given the artists the tools to create a realistic space, and Masaccio had been the first to populate that space with real, believable, and deeply human figures. Together, these two great pioneers had thrown open a new window onto the world, and the artists of the Renaissance would now rush to look through it, eager to explore all the new and beautiful possibilities that lay beyond. In the bustling and brilliant city of Florence, amidst the workshops of the great painters and sculptors, there was one mind, one artist, who stood apart. This was Leonardo da Vinci. He was a man who was consumed by a deep and insatiable curiosity, a man for whom art and science were not two separate disciplines, but were two sides of the same beautiful coin, two different languages that could be used to describe the great and profound mystery of the natural world. To truly understand the genius of Leonardo, to understand the incredible, living quality of his great masterpieces, we must first enter the quiet and secret world of his studio late at night, a place where he embarked on one of the most daring and controversial intellectual journeys of the entire Renaissance. For Leonardo, it was not enough to simply paint a beautiful human figure. He needed to understand it. He needed to know how the muscles moved beneath the skin, how the bones of the skeleton fit together, and how the great and intricate machine of the human body truly worked. And to gain this deep and forbidden knowledge, Leonardo did something that was almost unheard of in his time. In the dead of night, in the quiet and solitude of his secret studio, by the flickering and uncertain light of a single candle, he began to dissect human bodies. Can you imagine the immense courage and the incredible intellectual drive that this must have required? In an age when the desecration of the human body was considered a great and terrible sin, Leonardo risked his reputation, his freedom, and perhaps even his very life, all in the pursuit of a deeper and more profound understanding of the human form. His studio, during these long and secret nights, would have been a place of intense and quiet concentration. The air would have been thick with the smell of wax and of strange, preserving herbs, a scent that mingled with the familiar and comforting aroma of linseed oil and of fresh plaster. The only sound would have been the quiet and rhythmic scratch of his pen on paper, as he meticulously and beautifully recorded everything he saw. He was not just a scientist, he was an artist, and he saw a deep and profound beauty in the intricate and elegant design of the human body. He saw the muscles as a series of beautiful, interwoven ropes, the bones as a magnificent and perfect piece of divine architecture. And from these long and secret nights of study came his magnificent and world-famous anatomical drawings. These were not just simple scientific illustrations, they were true works of art, a perfect and beautiful synthesis of scientific precision and artistic grace. He drew the delicate and intricate network of the human nervous system, the powerful and elegant structure of the human skeleton, and the complex and beautiful chambers of the human heart, all with an accuracy and a detail that was centuries ahead of its time. His drawings were filled with notes, written in his strange and famous mirror script, a quiet and personal code that recorded his thoughts, his questions, and his profound and growing sense of awe at the incredible and beautiful complexity of the human machine. And it was from this deep and intimate understanding of the human body that Leonardo was able to create his famous drawing, the Vitruvian Man. This iconic image, of a man standing with his arms and his legs outstretched within a perfect circle and a perfect square, was more than just an anatomical study, it was a profound philosophical statement. It was a beautiful and powerful representation of the great humanist idea that man himself is the measure of all things, that the human form is a microcosm of the entire universe, its proportions reflecting the perfect and harmonious geometry of the cosmos itself. And so, in the quiet solitude of his secret studio, Leonardo da Vinci peeled back the layers of the human form, not as an act of desecration, but as an act of profound and beautiful reverence. He was seeking to understand the very blueprint of humanity, the divine and elegant design of the greatest of all of God's creations. And it was this deep and secret knowledge, this intimate understanding of the human machine, that would allow him to infuse his paintings with an incredible and unprecedented sense of life, of movement, and of soul. He was not just painting what he saw, he was painting what he knew. And this deep knowledge would be the key to the next great revolution he would bring to the world of art, the mastery of light and of shadow. The quiet and often secret knowledge that Leonardo da Vinci had gained from his long nights of anatomical study would now begin to find its true and most beautiful expression in his art. His deep and intimate understanding of the human body, of its muscles, its bones, and its nerves, gave him a power that no other artist of his time possessed. It was the power to not just paint the surface of a person, but to capture the very soul that lived and breathed beneath the skin. And the key to unlocking this new and profound sense of realism, this ability to paint a living, thinking, and feeling human being, lay in his revolutionary and masterful use of light and of shadow. For centuries, the painters of the early Renaissance had been striving to create a new sense of realism in their work. They had mastered the new and exciting science of linear perspective, which allowed them to create a convincing illusion of three-dimensional space. But their figures, for all their new solidity, often still felt somewhat hard and statuesque, their outlines too sharp and defined, as if they had been carved from stone rather than painted with a soft brush. Leonardo, however, saw the world differently. He understood that in the real world, there are no hard lines. The edges of things are soft, they blur and they melt into one another in the gentle play of light and of shadow. And so, he developed a revolutionary new painting technique that would forever change the art of painting. This was his famous sfumato, a word that comes from the Italian for smoke. What was this new technique? Sfumato was the art of using incredibly subtle and delicate gradations of light and of shadow to model the human form. Leonardo would apply layer upon layer of thin, almost translucent, glazes of paint, allowing the tones to blend together seamlessly, creating a soft and hazy, almost smoky, effect. This incredible technique allowed him to soften the outlines of his figures, to create a sense of real atmosphere, and to capture the gentle and almost imperceptible transitions of light as it falls across the curved surfaces of the human face and body. The result was a new and profound sense of realism, a sense of a figure that was truly and completely integrated into the space and the atmosphere around it. And it was in his most famous and most enigmatic masterpiece, the Mona Lisa, that Leonardo would use this technique to its most brilliant and most beautiful effect. Can you picture her? The gentle and almost impossibly soft corners of her eyes and her mouth, the very places that hold the key to her famous, fleeting, and mysterious smile, are rendered with the most delicate and subtle use of sfumato. There are no hard lines, no sharp definitions, just a soft and gentle blurring of light and of shadow that gives her expression a sense of life, of movement, and of a deep and unknowable inner world. It is this revolutionary technique that makes her seem so alive, so real, as if she is a living, breathing person who is looking back at us from across the centuries, a quiet and beautiful soul captured in paint. But Leonardo's genius was not limited to the world of art. His insatiable curiosity drove him to explore every facet of the natural world, and his famous notebooks are a testament to his incredible and wide-ranging intellect. In these notebooks, which were filled with thousands upon thousands of pages of drawings and of notes, he recorded his observations on everything from botany and geology to astronomy and engineering. And it was here, in the quiet solitude of his studio, that he dreamed of things that were centuries ahead of his time. He designed magnificent and complex machines, including flying machines that were based on his careful and meticulous study of the anatomy of birds. He drew detailed and beautiful plans for armored tanks, for giant crossbows, and for complex hydraulic systems. These incredible drawings were not just idle fantasies, they were the work of a true and visionary scientist, a man who believed that by understanding the fundamental principles of nature, humanity could one day master them. Leonardo da Vinci, the great universal man of the Renaissance, was a figure who perfectly embodied the new and powerful spirit of his age. He was a man who saw no division between the worlds of art and of science, a man who understood that a deep and scientific understanding of the world could only enhance its profound and mysterious beauty. His life's work was a testament to the power of human curiosity and to the boundless and incredible potential of the human mind. He was a true giant, a man whose shadow would stretch across the centuries, and whose brilliant and revolutionary innovations would continue to influence and to inspire artists and scientists for all time. While the great Leonardo da Vinci was quietly and methodically unlocking the secrets of the human body and the mysteries of light and of shadow, another great and powerful artistic force was at work in the city of Florence. His name was Michelangelo Buonarroti, and he was, in almost every way, the very opposite of Leonardo. Where Leonardo was a man of science, of quiet and patient observation, and of a subtle and graceful beauty, Michelangelo was a man of intense and fiery passion, of deep and profound faith, and of a raw and powerful, almost divine, creative energy. He was not just a painter or an architect, he was, above all else, a sculptor, a man who saw the world not in terms of light and of shadow, but in terms of solid, three-dimensional form. And his greatest and most enduring belief was that the magnificent figures he created were not of his own making, but that they had always existed, trapped within the great blocks of marble from which he carved them, and that his sacred duty, as an artist, was simply to set them free. The story of his most famous and most beloved masterpiece, the great statue of David, begins not with an act of creation, but with an act of abandonment. For nearly 40 long years, a colossal and magnificent block of pure, white Carrara marble had been lying neglected in the dusty courtyard of the Florence Cathedral. It was a notoriously difficult piece of stone, tall and thin, a great giant that the Florentines called the Giant. And it had already been worked on and then abandoned by two other, lesser sculptors, who had declared it to be unworkable, a flawed and ruined block of marble. For decades, it lay there, exposed to the elements, a great and silent challenge to all the artists of Florence, a symbol of a great ambition that had ended in failure. And then, in the year 1501, the city fathers of Florence, the men who were in charge of the great works of the cathedral, and who were searching for an artist who was brave enough and skilled enough to take on this impossible challenge, turned to the young and already famous Michelangelo. He was just 26 years old at the time, but he had already stunned the entire world with his magnificent and heartbreaking sculpture, the Pietà, which he had just completed in Rome. Michelangelo, with his characteristic and often prickly confidence, and his deep and unshakable belief in his own incredible abilities, accepted the commission. He looked at the great, flawed block of marble, and where other artists had seen only an unsolvable problem, he saw a beautiful and heroic figure, a perfect young hero, trapped within the stone, just waiting to be released. For the next 3 long and arduous years, Michelangelo worked in almost complete and total secrecy, a solitary and almost monkish figure, his studio surrounded by a high, wooden fence to protect his work from the prying and jealous eyes of his rivals. Can you picture him? A man of immense and powerful physical strength, his body covered in a fine, white marble dust, his face a mask of intense and almost painful concentration. The only sound in his studio was the constant and rhythmic tap, tap, tap of his hammer and his chisel on the great stone, as he slowly and carefully began to chip away all that was not David. This was not just an act of immense physical labor, it was a profound act of intellectual and spiritual creation. He was not just carving a statue, he was giving birth to an idea, the very idea of the Florentine Republic itself, a small and virtuous republic that had, like the young David, bravely and successfully stood up to the great and powerful giants, the tyrants, that surrounded it. And when the great statue was finally and dramatically unveiled to the public in the year 1504, the people of Florence were completely and utterly astounded. This was not the boy David of the earlier Renaissance artists, like the great Donatello. This was something new, something powerful, something completely and totally revolutionary. This was David not after his great victory over the giant, Goliath, but in the quiet and intensely concentrated moment just before the great battle. His young and magnificent body is relaxed, but his brow is furrowed, his neck is tensed with anticipation, and his large, powerful eyes are fixed on the unseen giant that stands before him. It is a moment of pure and perfect potential, a powerful and eternal symbol of incredible courage, of deep intelligence, and of an unshakable faith in the face of overwhelming and seemingly impossible odds. The statue of David immediately became the great and beloved symbol of the Florentine Republic, and it cemented Michelangelo's reputation as the greatest sculptor of his time, and perhaps of all time. He had taken a flawed and forgotten block of stone, a block that all others had abandoned, and from it, he had set free a perfect and immortal hero, a hero that would go on to inspire and to captivate the entire world for centuries to come. In the year 1508, Michelangelo, who had now firmly established his reputation as the greatest sculptor of his age with his magnificent and heroic David, was summoned back to Rome by the powerful and ambitious Pope Julius II. The Pope, a great and often difficult and impatient patron of the arts, had a new and monumental task for the great artist. He did not, however, want another magnificent sculpture. Instead, he commissioned Michelangelo to paint the vast and vaulted ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the Pope's own private chapel in the very heart of the Vatican. Michelangelo, at first, was deeply and vehemently opposed to the idea. "I am a sculptor, not a painter," he famously and repeatedly protested. He was a man who worked with the chisel and the hammer, a man who saw the world in terms of solid, three-dimensional form. And the art of fresco painting, with its complex and unforgiving techniques, with its need for speed and for a different kind of vision, was not his chosen medium. He even suspected, with his characteristic and often paranoid suspicion, that the entire commission was a great and malicious plot, a trap that had been set for him by his great rivals, like the architect Bramante, who hoped to see him fail at this immense and impossibly difficult task, a task at which they knew he was not a master. But the will of the warrior Pope, Julius II, was not something that could be easily or safely denied. And so, with great reluctance and a heavy and resentful heart, Michelangelo finally accepted the commission. And for the next 4 long and incredibly arduous years, from 1508 to 1512, he would embark on one of the most incredible and physically demanding feats of artistic creation in all of human history. He designed a complex and innovative scaffolding system that would allow him to work on the vast, curved surface of the ceiling, which soared more than 60 feet above the hard, marble floor of the chapel. And here, day after day, week after week, month after month, he worked in almost complete and total solitude, his relationship with the impatient Pope often a stormy and difficult one, with the Pope himself often climbing the high scaffolding to check on the artist's progress and to argue with him about the details of the great work. Can you picture the scene? Imagine Michelangelo, lying on his back on the high, wooden scaffolding, his face just inches from the wet plaster of the ceiling. The paint and the plaster would drip down into his eyes, his neck would ache with a constant and searing pain, and his body, after hours and hours in this unnatural and contorted position, would grow stiff and contorted. He later wrote a poem about his suffering, describing how his beard pointed up to heaven and his spine was bent into a bow. But still, he painted on, his brush moving with a divine and almost furious energy. He was not just a painter, he was a creator, a man who was, in his own way, reenacting the very stories he was painting on the ceiling above. He was bringing a new and powerful world into existence, a world of beautiful and heroic figures, a world that was born from his own incredible and powerful imagination and his profound and deep-seated faith. And what a magnificent and awe-inspiring world it was. The vast expanse of the Sistine ceiling, which covers over 5,000 square feet, is a breathtaking and magnificent masterpiece of biblical narration. Down the very center of the ceiling, Michelangelo painted 9 great scenes from the book of Genesis, from the great and powerful creation of Adam, where the hand of a powerful and muscular God reaches out to give the spark of life to the first man, to the great and terrible deluge, the great flood, and the subsequent story of Noah. And surrounding these great central scenes are a host of other beautiful and powerful figures, great, muscular male nudes, the ignudi, who seem to writhe with a powerful and expressive energy, the great prophets of the Old Testament, their faces filled with a deep and prophetic wisdom, and the ancient and powerful sibyls who were said to have foretold the coming of Christ. The entire ceiling is a complex and beautiful theological and philosophical statement, a magnificent and awe-inspiring vision of humanity's long and epic journey, from its divine creation to its fall from grace, and its eventual and ultimate hope for salvation. When the great work was finally completed and the vast scaffolding was at last removed in the year 1512, the world was left completely and utterly breathless. The Sistine ceiling was more than just a series of beautiful paintings, it was a complete and total revolution in the art of painting. Michelangelo had brought the powerful, three-dimensional, and monumental feel of his sculpture to the two-dimensional art of fresco painting, creating figures that seemed to have a real and tangible weight, a powerful physical presence that was unlike anything that had ever been seen before. His use of vibrant color, of dramatic composition, and of a deep and profound human emotion had completely and forever changed the course of all of Western art. He had created a work of such immense and breathtaking power, a work of such profound spiritual depth, that it would go on to inspire and to awe countless millions of people for centuries to come. The man who had protested that he was not a painter had, in the end, created the single greatest and most magnificent painting in the entire history of the world. As the great titans, Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, were reshaping the world of art with their profound and powerful innovations, a new star was rising in Italy. This was Raphael, a young artist from the quiet town of Urbino, and he possessed a genius that was of a completely different nature. Where Leonardo's art was born from a deep and scientific curiosity, and Michelangelo's from a fiery and tormented spiritual struggle, Raphael's art was born from a sense of pure, effortless grace, of serene beauty, and of a perfect and harmonious balance. In his short but incredibly brilliant career, he would absorb the great lessons of his two great rivals and would synthesize them into a new and beautiful style that would come to define the very ideal of the High Renaissance. Raphael arrived in Florence as a young man, and he studied the works of Leonardo and Michelangelo with a deep and humble admiration. He learned from Leonardo the secrets of sfumato, of how to create a soft and gentle light, and from Michelangelo, he learned how to give his figures a sense of weight, of power, and of monumental grandeur. But he added to these lessons his own innate sense of grace and of tranquil beauty, creating works that were both perfectly composed and deeply human. His many beautiful paintings of the Madonna and Child, for instance, are renowned for their incredible tenderness, their gentle humanity, and their serene and perfect sense of balance. But it was in Rome, under the powerful and ambitious patronage of Pope Julius II, the very same pope who had commissioned the Sistine ceiling, that Raphael would create his greatest masterpieces. In the year 1509, the Pope commissioned the young Raphael, who was just 26 years old at the time, to decorate a series of rooms in the Vatican Palace, rooms that would come to be known as the Raphael Rooms. And it is here, on the walls of the Pope's own private library, that Raphael would paint his most famous and most beloved work, the magnificent fresco known as the School of Athens. This single painting is a perfect and beautiful embodiment of the entire spirit of the Renaissance. It is a celebration of knowledge, of philosophy, and of the great and enduring power of human reason. Can you picture it? In a vast and magnificent hall of classical Roman architecture, all the greatest philosophers and thinkers of the ancient world are gathered together in a great and harmonious assembly. At the very center of the composition, framed by a series of magnificent arches that recede into the distance with a perfect use of linear perspective, stand the two giants of Greek philosophy, Plato and Aristotle. Plato, who is depicted with the wise and aged face of Leonardo da Vinci himself, points his finger upwards, towards the heavens, towards his world of perfect and eternal ideas. And Aristotle, his younger and more practical student, gestures downwards, towards the earth, towards the tangible, observable, and natural world. And around these two central figures are all the other great thinkers of the ancient world. There is the great mathematician, Pythagoras, who is demonstrating his theories to a group of eager students. There is the brooding and solitary figure of Heraclitus, who is depicted with the face of Michelangelo, leaning on a great block of marble. And there is Euclid, who is bent over a slate, demonstrating a geometric proof. The School of Athens is more than just a magnificent group portrait of all the great thinkers of antiquity. It is a profound and powerful statement about the Renaissance itself. It is a celebration of the humanist belief that the wisdom of the classical world and the faith of the Christian world could coexist in perfect and beautiful harmony. Raphael has placed these great pagan philosophers in the very heart of the Vatican, in the Pope's own library, creating a powerful and beautiful bridge between the two great intellectual traditions of Western civilization. The painting is a masterpiece of balance, of order, and of serene and perfect harmony, its composition as clear and as logical as the great philosophical ideas it depicts. The success of the School of Athens, and the other frescoes in the Raphael Room cemented Raphael's reputation as one of the greatest painters of his age. His workshop in Rome became a bustling and vibrant center of artistic production, and his graceful and harmonious style would go on to influence the course of European painting for centuries to come. He was known for his gentle and amiable personality, a stark contrast to the solitary and often difficult nature of his great rival, Michelangelo. And in his work, we see not a tormented struggle, but a sense of calm and effortless perfection, a beautiful and serene vision of a world where heaven and earth, faith and reason, beauty and truth, all exist in a state of perfect and divine harmony. Raphael died in the year 1520 at the tragically young age of 37, his death plunging the entire city of Rome into a state of deep and profound mourning. But he had, in his short and brilliant life, created works of such serene and timeless beauty that they would forever stand as the very embodiment of the grace, the harmony, and the high ideals of the Italian Renaissance. Of course. My sincere apologies that the previous version of this chapter on the Venetian Renaissance was not as detailed and immersive as it should have been. You are absolutely right to ask for a deeper exploration. The unique and beautiful art of Venice is a story of light, of color, and of a completely different way of seeing the world, and it deserves the fullest and most detailed narrative we can give it. I have completely rewritten this section with a significant focus on expanding every element, the unique atmospheric qualities of the city of Venice, the philosophical differences between the Venetian and Florentine schools, and a much deeper dive into the revolutionary techniques of its greatest masters. Let us continue our epic journey into the heart of the Renaissance. While the great masters in the powerful cities of Florence and in Rome were revolutionizing the art of painting through their incredible mastery of drawing, of composition, and of monumental, sculptural form, another, equally brilliant, artistic revolution was taking place in a city that was unlike any other in the entire world. This was the city of Venice. Can you picture it? A magnificent and magical city, a city that was built not on solid ground, but on a series of small islands in a marshy and beautiful lagoon, its great palaces and its magnificent, golden-domed churches seeming to rise directly from the shimmering and ever-changing waters of the Adriatic Sea. Venice was a city of water, of light, and of glorious, vibrant color. It was a great and powerful maritime republic whose immense wealth was built on its extensive and lucrative trade with the East, with the great and exotic empires of Byzantium and beyond. And it was this unique and beautiful environment, this constant and beautiful and shimmering play of light reflecting off the water of the canals and onto the colored marble of its buildings, that would give birth to a new and completely different kind of painting, a style that would celebrate not the hard, clear, and intellectual lines of drawing, but the soft, sensual, and deeply emotional power of color itself. The Venetian school of painting, which reached its glorious peak in the 16th century, was defined by its deep and passionate love of color and of light, a philosophy of art that the Italians called colorito. This stood in stark contrast to the artistic philosophy of Florence and of Rome, which was known as disegno, and which emphasized the importance of drawing and of design as the foundation of all art. The Venetian artists, working with the new and incredibly versatile medium of oil paint on canvas, which was far better suited to the damp and humid Venetian climate than the fresco technique that was so popular in Florence and Rome, were absolute masters of creating a sense of atmosphere, of mood, and of rich, sensuous texture. They did not see color as something that was simply used to fill in a drawing. They saw color as the primary and most powerful means of artistic expression, a way to capture the fleeting and beautiful qualities of the world and the deep and complex emotions of the human heart. The great and mysterious pioneer of this new Venetian style was an artist named Giorgione. His paintings, like the famous and enigmatic Tempest, are filled with a sense of quiet and beautiful mystery. They are like visual poems, their true meaning often elusive and open to many different interpretations. But it was his student, the great and magnificent Titian, who would become the true titan of the Venetian school, the man who would come to dominate its artistic scene for over half a century. Titian was a true and undisputed master of color, a painter whose incredible skill in handling paint was almost unparalleled in the entire history of art. He painted with a freedom and a boldness that was completely new, often applying his paint in thick, rich, and expressive brushstrokes, and sometimes even, it was said, with his own fingers. His paintings are renowned for their incredible richness, their deep and glowing, almost internal, colors, and their beautiful and subtle handling of light. He painted everything, from powerful and dramatic mythological scenes and deeply moving religious altarpieces to beautiful and incredibly insightful portraits that seemed to capture the very soul of his sitters. He became the most sought-after and famous painter in all of Europe, working for kings, for popes, and for emperors, and his long and incredibly successful career made him a powerful symbol of the immense wealth, the cultural prestige, and the unique artistic genius of the Venetian Republic. And alongside Titian were other great Venetian masters, like the brilliant Veronese, whose magnificent and sprawling feast scenes, like the famous Wedding at Cana, are a glorious and joyful celebration of the wealth, the pageantry, and the vibrant and colorful life of the great city of Venice. And there was Tintoretto, a painter of incredible and almost furious energy, whose dramatic and often dark and turbulent compositions were filled with a powerful and dynamic sense of motion and of deep spiritual intensity. These artists, with their profound and beautiful emphasis on color, on light, and on the sensual beauty of the world, created a powerful and influential alternative to the more intellectual and form-based art of Florence and of Rome. They reminded the world that a painting could be more than just a beautiful and well-ordered drawing. It could be a kind of visual poetry, a great symphony of color and of light that could speak directly to the heart and to the soul, and could capture the fleeting and beautiful and often mysterious essence of life itself. The brilliant and beautiful light of Venice had added a new and glorious color to the magnificent and ever-changing palette of the Italian Renaissance. As the great artistic revolutions were unfolding in the sun-drenched and vibrant cities of Italy, another, quieter, but equally profound Renaissance was taking place in the colder and more somber lands of Northern Europe. The artists of Germany, of Flanders, and of the Netherlands were also captivated by the new spirit of the age, by the humanist celebration of the individual, and by the burning desire to depict the world with a new and powerful sense of realism. But the Northern Renaissance was not a simple and pale imitation of the Italian style. It was a unique and beautiful fusion of the new, classical ideals that were traveling up from the south with the deep-rooted and distinct artistic traditions of the north. The northern artists brought their own unique and powerful sensibilities to the Renaissance, a love of intricate and almost microscopic detail, a deep and often somber and introspective spirituality, and a powerful and unflinching, almost brutal, realism that was very different from the idealized beauty of their Italian counterparts. The great and undisputed master of this northern Renaissance was the brilliant and endlessly curious German artist, Albrecht Dürer. Dürer was a true universal man, a figure who, like his great Italian contemporary, Leonardo da Vinci, was consumed by a deep and insatiable curiosity about the world. He was a master painter, a brilliant draftsman, and one of the most innovative and influential printmakers in all of art history. He traveled to Italy to study the works of the great Italian masters, and he was one of the very first northern artists to fully absorb and to understand the new and exciting scientific principles of linear perspective and the classical ideals of human anatomy. But he did not simply copy the Italian style. Instead, he brilliantly and creatively blended these new and powerful ideas with the powerful traditions of his own German heritage, creating a new and powerful style that was all his own. His famous and incredibly insightful self-portraits are a powerful testament to this new, humanistic spirit. He depicted himself not as a humble craftsman, but with a new and unprecedented sense of psychological depth, of individual self-awareness, and of an almost Christ-like artistic authority. But Dürer's most significant and lasting contribution to the art of the Renaissance was in the medium of printmaking, particularly in his magnificent woodcuts and his incredibly detailed engravings. In an age before the invention of modern photography, prints were the only way that images could be mass-produced and disseminated to a wide and eager audience. And Dürer, with his incredible technical skill and his brilliant and powerful artistic vision, elevated the art of printmaking from a simple craft to a major and respected art form, a level of sophistication and of beauty that had never been seen before. His famous series of woodcuts, like the magnificent and terrifying Apocalypse, and his incredibly detailed and beautiful engravings, like the famous and enigmatic Melancholia I, and the powerful Night, Death, and the Devil, were works of incredible complexity and profound intellectual and spiritual depth. These prints, which could be produced in the hundreds, were sold and circulated all across Europe, and they played a crucial and powerful role in spreading the ideas and the artistic styles of the Renaissance to a much broader audience, making Dürer one of the most famous and influential artists of his time. And the spread of these new ideas, these new ways of seeing the world, was being dramatically and rapidly accelerated by another great, northern invention, one that would prove to be even more revolutionary than the discovery of linear perspective. This was the invention of the printing press with movable type by Johannes Gutenberg in Germany in the mid-15th century. What was the true impact of this incredible new technology? It was, in a word, total. The printing press made it possible to produce books and other written materials quickly, cheaply, and in vast and unprecedented quantities. This led to a true and profound information revolution, a revolution that would completely and forever reshape the intellectual and the religious landscape of all of Europe. The new humanist ideas, the newly rediscovered classical texts of Plato and of Cicero, and, most consequentially of all, the Bible itself, could now be printed and distributed to a vast and ever-growing audience of lay readers. This new and widespread access to knowledge would have profound and far-reaching consequences that are still being felt today. It fueled the great intellectual ferment of the Renaissance. It empowered the Protestant Reformation by allowing the reformers, like Martin Luther, to spread their ideas directly to the people, and it contributed to a significant and lasting increase in literacy throughout all of Europe. The printing press was a truly democratic invention, a powerful tool that broke the long-held monopoly on knowledge that had for so long been held by the church and by the educated elite, and it placed the power of ideas directly into the hands of the people. The quiet and patient work of the northern artists, like the great Albrecht Dürer, and the revolutionary and world-changing power of the new printing press, had created a powerful and unstoppable new current of ideas, a great river of knowledge that would now flow to every corner of the continent, heralding the dawn of a new and truly modern age. In the quiet and beautiful city of Padua, in the early years of the 17th century, a brilliant and fiercely curious professor of mathematics named Galileo Galilei heard a rumor. It was a strange and exciting tale that had traveled from the distant and misty lands of the Netherlands, a story of a new and almost magical invention, spyglass, a simple tube of wood and of glass that could make distant objects appear closer. For most, this was a mere curiosity, a clever toy that could be used to see distant ships on the horizon. But for Galileo, a man whose mind was always questioning, always exploring, this rumor was the key to unlocking the very secrets of the heavens themselves. The worldview that Galileo had inherited, the world that was taught in all the great universities of Europe, was one that had stood, virtually unchallenged, for over 1400 years. This was the Ptolemaic system, an ancient and incredibly complex model of the universe that placed our own planet, the Earth, at the very center of all creation. In this view, the sun, the moon, the planets, and all the stars were believed to be perfect, unchanging, celestial orbs that revolved around the Earth in a series of perfect, crystalline spheres, a great and beautiful, divine clockwork. This geocentric model was more than just a scientific theory, it was a deeply ingrained part of the religious and the philosophical order of the time, a worldview that had been sanctioned by the powerful Catholic Church and was seen as a perfect reflection of God's perfect and earth-centered creation. But Galileo, a man who was inspired by the new and questioning spirit of the Renaissance and by the earlier, revolutionary work of the Polish astronomer Nicholas Copernicus, who had proposed a sun-centered, or heliocentric, model of the universe, was beginning to have his doubts. And in the year 1609, using his incredible skill as a craftsman and his deep understanding of the principles of optics, Galileo built his own version of the new spyglass. He created a powerful new telescope, a telescope that was far more powerful than any that had ever been seen before. And then, he did something that would change the course of human history forever. He turned his telescope away from the distant ships and the far-off mountains of the earth, and he pointed it towards the heavens. What he saw in the quiet and solitude of his nighttime observations, from his small garden in Padua, would shatter the old and comfortable certainties of his age. Imagine the scene. A man, alone on a cool Italian night, his eye pressed to a simple tube of wood and of glass, looking at the heavens in a way that no human being had ever done before. First, he looked at the moon. The moon, which had for so long been believed to be a perfect and smooth celestial sphere, a ball of pure and divine ether, was revealed to be a world in its own right. A world of rugged, tall mountains and of deep, dark craters, a world that was, in many ways, just like our own imperfect earth. This single observation directly and powerfully contradicted the ancient idea of a perfect and unchanging heavens. And then, he turned his telescope to the great and wandering planet Jupiter. And here, he saw something even more remarkable. He saw 4 small and previously unknown points of light, 4 tiny and beautiful stars, that seemed to be circling the great planet. He watched them night after night, carefully and meticulously charting their movements. And he came to a stunning and revolutionary conclusion: these were not stars, they were moons, moons that were orbiting the planet Jupiter in the same way that our own moon orbits the Earth. This discovery was a devastating blow to the old, Earth-centered model of the universe. It proved, for the very first time, and with irrefutable, observational evidence, that not everything in the heavens revolved around the Earth. And his incredible discoveries did not end there. He observed the strange and beautiful phases of the planet Venus, which proved that it, too, must be orbiting the Sun, not the Earth. And he saw that the great, luminous and beautiful band of the Milky Way, which had for so long been a soft and mysterious cloud in the night sky, was, in fact, composed of countless millions of individual, distant, and previously unseen stars. In the year 1610, Galileo published his incredible and world-changing findings in a small but explosive book that he called Sidereus Nuncius, or The Starry Messenger. The book was an immediate and international sensation, and it made Galileo one of the most famous and most controversial figures in all of Europe. His observations provided the very first, direct, and powerful observational evidence that supported the new, sun-centered theory of Copernicus. But Galileo's discoveries also brought him into a direct and dangerous conflict with the powerful and established authority of the Catholic Church. The Church viewed the heliocentric theory as a dangerous heresy, a direct contradiction of the sacred scriptures and a profound challenge to the very foundations of their worldview. Galileo, a man of deep and abiding faith himself, did not see his discoveries as a contradiction of religion, but as a new and more profound way of appreciating the magnificence and the true genius of God's creation. But the Church, at that time, did not agree. The great and brilliant light of scientific observation had now come into a direct and fateful conflict with the deeply entrenched power of religious dogma. The stage was now set for one of the most famous and most tragic confrontations between the world of science and the world of authority in all of history. The starry messenger had delivered his revolutionary message, but the world was not yet ready to hear it. As the great intellectual and artistic revolutions of the Renaissance were reshaping the very soul of Europe from within, another, equally transformative, revolution was taking place on the high seas, reshaping the very body of the world itself. A new generation of brave and ambitious sailors, armed with new technologies and a new and insatiable curiosity about the world, were beginning to venture out into the vast and unknown oceans, their small and fragile ships pushing the boundaries of the known world further and further. This great age of exploration, which unfolded in perfect parallel with the Renaissance, would not only dramatically expand the European understanding of the planet's geography but would also provide a powerful and endless new source of inspiration and of wonder for the artists and the thinkers back home. The great voyages of explorers like Christopher Columbus, who reached the Americas in 1492, and Vasco da Gama, who found a new, all-sea route around Africa to the rich and fabled lands of India, completely and forever shattered the old, medieval worldview. For centuries upon centuries, the European map of the world had been a small and incomplete thing, a familiar and comforting space that was surrounded by vast, empty oceans that were populated only by monsters and by myths. But now, these brave navigators had proven that the world was much, much larger, much stranger, and much more wonderful than anyone had ever imagined. They brought back stories of new continents, of new peoples, and of new and exotic cultures, stories that would ignite the imagination of all of Europe. And it was another great and historic voyage, the very first circumnavigation of the globe, that would provide the final and irrefutable proof of this new and expanded worldview. This incredible journey, which was begun by the Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan in the year 1519, was one of the most ambitious and most perilous undertakings in the entire history of human exploration. Magellan and his crew sailed across the vast and empty expanse of the Pacific Ocean. They endured incredible and almost unimaginable hardships, and they faced down mutinies, starvation, and the constant and terrifying fear of the unknown. And while Magellan himself was tragically killed during the voyage, in the islands that would one day become the Philippines, his one surviving ship, the Victoria, finally managed to return to Spain in the year 1522, having completed the very first journey around the entire world. This incredible achievement was a powerful and profound moment in human history. It was the ultimate and undeniable proof that the world was round, and it provided a new and accurate understanding of the true and immense scale of our planet. The old maps, with their great sea monsters and their terrifying, unknown voids, were now obsolete. A new and much larger, much more complex, and much more wonderful world had been revealed. The discovery of these new lands and these new peoples had a profound and transformative impact on the artists and the thinkers of the Renaissance. The exotic plants, the strange and beautiful animals, like the turkey and the armadillo, and the diverse and fascinating cultures of the New World provided a rich and exciting new source of subject matter for their work. Artists began to incorporate these new and exotic images into their paintings, and writers began to tell new and fantastic stories that were set in these distant and mysterious lands. But more than just providing new subject matter, these discoveries forced a profound and often difficult reassessment of humanity's very place in the world. The existence of these previously unknown peoples challenged the very foundations of their religious and their philosophical beliefs. It sparked new and intense debates about the nature of humanity, about the meaning of civilization, and about the moral responsibilities that came with this new and awesome knowledge. The age of exploration was, therefore, much more than just a period of geographic discovery. It was a time that completely and totally reshaped the European imagination. It was a time that expanded not just the maps of the world, but the very boundaries of what was thought to be possible. The great navigators, with their incredible courage and their unwavering determination, had revealed a world that was far more complex and far more wonderful than anyone had ever dared to dream. And this new and expanded worldview, this new sense of boundless possibility, would become a powerful and driving force in the continued unfolding of the Renaissance, and would go on to shape the course of all of human history in the centuries to come, for better and for worse. Of course. Let us now arrive at the final chapter of our epic journey. We have followed the great navigators to the ends of the earth, and we have peered through Galileo's telescope into the heavens. The old world, with its small maps and its earth-centered universe, has been shattered. Now, we must reflect on the profound and lasting legacy of this incredible age of art, of science, and of discovery. The Renaissance, that brilliant and multifaceted rebirth of art and of learning, was more than just a period of immense cultural achievement, it was a profound and fundamental revolution in human consciousness. It was a time that completely and forever reshaped the Western world, laying the essential groundwork for our own modern age. Its legacy is not just confined to the magnificent masterpieces that now hang in the great museums of the world. It is a legacy of ideas, a new way of seeing and of understanding our world and our place within it. The Renaissance was the moment when humanity, after a long and quiet slumber, looked up at the stars once more and began to dream of a new and boundless future. What was the most significant and lasting legacy of this great age? It was the profound intellectual and cultural shift that we now call humanism. This powerful new philosophy, which placed a new and unprecedented emphasis on the value, the dignity, and the incredible potential of the individual human being, was the true and driving engine of the Renaissance. It encouraged a new spirit of critical inquiry, a new confidence in the power of human reason, and a deep and passionate interest in the natural world. This humanistic spirit not only fueled the great artistic and scientific achievements of the time but also profoundly influenced the development of Western political thought, leading to new and revolutionary ideas about individual liberty, about justice, and about representative government. The Renaissance also fostered a new and powerful appreciation for the importance of education and of intellectual curiosity. The invention of the printing press, as we have seen, democratized access to knowledge, spreading new ideas and promoting literacy on an unprecedented scale. And the founding of new universities and academies created vibrant new centers of learning and of debate. This deep and abiding respect for knowledge and for rational inquiry would pave the way for the great scientific revolution of the 17th century and the subsequent Enlightenment of the 18th century, two great intellectual movements that would build directly upon the foundations that had been so carefully laid by the thinkers of the Renaissance. And of course, the artistic legacy of the Renaissance is immeasurable. The great masters, from Leonardo and Michelangelo to Raphael and Titian, not only created some of the most beautiful and beloved works of art in all of human history, but they also completely revolutionized the very language of visual expression. Their mastery of linear perspective, of human anatomy, and of the emotional power of light and of color, established new artistic standards that would go on to influence the course of Western art for centuries to come. They taught us how to see the world with a new clarity, with a new depth, and with a new and profound sense of human empathy. The great voyages of the Age of Exploration, which unfolded in parallel with the Renaissance, expanded not just the maps of the world, but the very boundaries of the human imagination. The discovery of new continents and of new cultures shattered the old, comfortable certainties of the medieval world and ushered in a new and global age. And while this new age would bring with it its own new and often tragic conflicts, it also fostered a new and powerful sense of a shared human destiny, a recognition that we are all, in the end, inhabitants of a single, interconnected world. And so, as we reflect on this remarkable period, we see that the Renaissance was not just a historical era, it is a living legacy. It is a powerful and enduring testament to the boundless potential of the human spirit, our incredible capacity for creativity, for discovery, and for constant and beautiful reinvention. It reminds us that our understanding of the world is always evolving, that there are always new horizons to explore, and that the quiet and patient pursuit of knowledge and of beauty is one of the most noble and most human of all our endeavors. The starry sky of reason that was first illuminated by the great minds of the Renaissance continues to be our guide to this very day, a quiet and constant inspiration for us to question, to explore, and to dream. And with that final thought, our long and quiet journey into the magnificent world of the Renaissance comes to its end. From the first, gentle dawn of humanism in the city of Florence to the great and revolutionary discoveries that would forever change our understanding of the heavens and of the earth, it has been an epic saga of immense creativity, of profound intellectual courage, and of enduring beauty. Now, let the echoes of the great master's studios, the quiet whisper of a brush on canvas, and the silent, turning stars of Galileo's new cosmos, gently fade into the quiet of the night. It is time for history to rest, and it is time for you to rest as well. Good night, and have beautiful, creative dreams.